Thank you very much. Right, so I'll continue where I left off. So, as we were told that the rebels, that James Brooke, right, soon after he quelled the revolt of 1836, he sided with us and managed to consolidate power by expelling the Brunei administrators from Sarawak. Now, this is based on John Henry Walker, chapter 2, which talks about the insurgency and the foundations of Brooke power. Now, the chapter, if you were to read it, explains in more detail about how the rebellion came to be, which is also featured in that movie, Edge of the World, yeah, and how it helped to create a new kingdom in northwestern Borneo, centered on the Sarawak River Basin and administered by the Brooke family, British expatriates, and local chiefs, notwithstanding the coming prominence of the Prabangans themselves. Carrying on, James Brooke was supposed to be just another governor of a Brunei province. Okay, so Sarawak back then, we have to imagine, it was from Tanjung Datuk to Batang Semarahan. It was a very small province. It was not very big. In fact, it was just concentrated in the Sarawak River Basin. So Sarawak is not the size as it is today, many times more. At most, maybe you could picture it as big as the 1st Division or even less than that. So it was supposed to be just another governor of this province called Sarawak, which was a Brunei province, just as there were many Brunei lords in different parts of northwestern Borneo. He was ambitious in fulfilling his dream of owning his own private kingdom. And he used his desire to free the Sarawakians from Brunei as a precursor to his ambitions. He believed he was offered the state of Sarawak by Raja Muda Hashim should he successfully quell the revolt. His job was done, and he demanded the promise that was made to him. However, Brunei was not willing to give in, and in fact, assassinated all those responsible with Brooke's meddling in Sarawak's affairs. The assassination of Brooke's closest friends, especially Prince Badruddin and Raja Muda Hashim, was the last straw. Brooke confronted the Sultan of Brunei and his allies through gunboat diplomacy. Okay. Throughout Asian history, gunboat diplomacy was the tactic for many Westerners. What it meant was that the white man would enter the Asian city with a boat loaded with guns. Okay? There was no diplomacy. It was either you do as I say or face the consequences. Asian powers were not as well equipped to face such a threat. Hence, the phrase is an oxymoron, if anything, because yes, there was a gunboat, but it was hardly diplomatic. A good example of gunboat diplomacy happened when Commodore Matthew Perry entered Tokyo Harbor, demanding that American ships the right for free trade with Japan. This caused Meiji Restoration, which eventually turned Japan into a modernized nation. The other examples that come to mind were the ways that the British had acted towards the Chinese Qing government to secure free trade with Hong Kong, which caused the Opium Wars between Britain and China. Now, Brunei eventually relented, and Brooke was acknowledged as Raja of Sarawak by the Sultan of Brunei in the 1840s. Okay, all of this is taken from Robert Payne, The Assassination as well, The White Rajas of Sarawak, New York, Funk and Wacknells, and describes in full detail, pages 81 to 84, the massacre that the Sultan had arranged for the assassinations of Raja Muda Hashim and his brothers, which includes Prince Badruddin. So that stuff is not included in the movie because it might be a sensitive issue, but it's part of history. Yeah. All right. Sarawak thus became an independent nation called the Kingdom of Sarawak, 1841 to 1946. If not for this gunboat diplomacy, it's possible that James Brooke would have just acted as a governor in Sarawak, just like Sheriff Masaho was the governor of Sarike, so Pangeran, in other words. But instead of White Raja, we would have Pangeran Putih, White Pangeran. Okay, not White Raja. Okay. In order to maintain peace and order within his new realm, James Brooke needed local support. His insistence that Sarawak was for Sarawakians first never faltered. He included the Prabangan Datus, lords, as privy councillors for native affairs. It helped him to exert much power within Sarawak. As mentioned earlier, the Prabangan controlled the state by means of centuries-old patron-client relationships. Patron-client means that people are power. Nama, semangat, is based on following. Okay, who follows who? That you don't count by means of money. It's a feudal system that's based on who follows you. Okay, more followers, more richer. A bit like Facebook today, but that was the feudal system in the past. Yeah. So, all right. So it's patron client. Patron client means this is what we call system serah dan kerah. So that means they give themselves over to their datos to work as laborers, as slaves, as not necessarily slaves, but as laborers and as warriors to defend each other. But in return, they get the protection of the datos. Yeah, so that's the patron-client relationship. Hence, Brooke used these relationships as the basis of his power and prowess. Okay. This is also from John Henry Walker. In fact, it's the basis of his thesis, Power and Prowess in Northwest Borneo. The chapter 1 explains the intricacies of local power networks to which Brooke optimized to aid in his governance of Sarawak. Now, we don't hear of this when we look at modern history as written by as written by colonial historiographers, but we see this when we see this kind of history in action. Now, it would be a decision that was to ensure Sarawak's safety and stability for years to come. At this time, the 1840s, the Abang and Datus themselves were divided in loyalty. In one faction, they were supporting James Brooke. They were mainly those who sided with Datuk Tinggi Ali, okay, the man who had led the revolt against Brunei. We can suppose that what Brooke did was also the original intent of Patinggi Ali, and that was to stop the exploitation of Sarawakians under Brunei control. The other faction were those who sided with Datuk Tinggi Abdul Ghaffar, who felt Brooke's administration was disturbing age-old power relations, which involved what Brooke perceived as exploitation, piracy, and other vices. The first Raja, James Brooke, felt that he needed to dismantle these evils in his new kingdom. Now, the rivalry between those who supported Brooke and those who did not was the foundation for the wealth that later established this house, Rumah Batu. According to Baring Gould and Bamfield, now we have a Bamfield writer, so this guy wrote this about James Brooke and his choice of pembesar. Okay, Sir James Brooke had to look out for suitable officials for his government, and suitable ones were not so easily available. There is not much choice in rotten apples. So this was actually a really, really difficult situation. Who can he trust? Who can he not trust? You know, he's just new into this environment. So that's from Baring Gould, Bamfield, okay, page 207. Now, this meant that the first Raja, Sir James Brooke, or Raja Brooke, faced a great challenge as to who he could trust to run Sarawak at the level of the native populace, seeing that the founding principle of Brooke rule was that Sarawak was to be run for the benefit of Sarawak by the people of the state. This is not colonialism. This meant integrating age-old administrative structures, Asian structures, into Brooke's new government. Okay. Raja Brooke's choice was made easier when a faction made out of Datuk Bandar Maulana, Patinggi Ali's eldest son, okay, also from John Walker, page 50, shows us that Datuk Bandar Maulana was also the son of Datuk Patinggi Ali, his eldest son. Datuk Tumanggung Mersal and Abang Patah, Tumanggung's son, collaborated to inform the Raja of certain plots to end Brooke's Sarawak made by none other than Datuk Patinggi Abdul Ghaffar himself. Okay, according to Walker, this disclosure was provided on the basis that Patinggi Ghaffar was unhappy with some of the reforms Raja Brooke had made, particularly the one that replaced Dayak loyalty in favor of a monthly stipend. Okay, all right, so that's also from John Walker. Now, seeing that manpower and loyalty, okay, were more important to the nama or dignity of Malay lords, it was a hard hit for Datuk Patinggi Abdul Ghaffar. Can you imagine? You're taking away his idea of wealth and replacing it with money. Back then, money was nothing, but following was something, you know? So this was considered a threat, right? A threat to his reign. So, having held on to traditional systems, he was unable to adapt to Brooks' reform. Hence, Banda Maulana's faction, our family, was at an advantage over Patinggi Gapo. Okay. In the end, Patinggi Gapo was overthrown and in 1854 exiled to Mecca. So, there's some history behind all of this. Now, between 1854 and early 1860s, much happened to increase the Raja's favoritism for our family, Banda's family. Okay. These events happened when the Raja was seeking to expand Sarawak to the Sago coast of the Rajang Basin. This expansionism could not have taken place had not the Banda family ourselves supported and comforted the family of exiled elites from the town of Serike, located near the mouth of the Rajang. Years before, an ambitious and very influential man called Sheriff Masaho, who also had kinship ties with Patinggi Gapo, attacked Serike and ousted the ruling elites, the Abang of Serike. With the aid of the Raja and the Banda's family, they were reinstated by 1855. With this reinstallation of the Malay elites of Serike, the Banda family was able to exert influence over the Rajang Basin as the Raja's power expanded therein. Okay, that's from there. This basin was very rich in timber, as you know. It was also a fertile plain for much sought after jungle produce, in addition to being the world's primary exporter of sago. Now, knowing I come from a Scottish background as well, my mum grew up with sago-based desserts, but British style. And knowing that they were very much available in the UK, well, where did they get it from? Must have got it from somewhere. So I'm sure that had something to do with us. Okay, so let's see. Okay, that's with this new acquisition, wealth and affluence came to the Banda family. With the exclusion of Patinggi Gapo, the highest title was now Datuk Banda. There was no longer use of Datuk Patinggi. It was taboo. The late Patinggi Adi's eldest son became leader of the natives. He would reign as Datuk Banda Muhammad Lana or Datuk Banda Mulana. His brother Bo Hassan in some renderings, the father of Rumah Batu's founder, became a new Datuk. His title, Datuk Imam, meant that he was the chief among those in charge of the mosque and the religious affairs of the natives. He was so close to the Brooks that Brooke, the original heir of James Brooke, okay, the nephew and ruler of Sarawak, in his uncle's absence, commented that he was the best native I've ever met. The partnership became a bond of trust and mutual friendship. It represented the Banda's family's close connection with the Raja by being a bridge between the Raja and the Malays of Sarawak. With the death of his brother, Datuk Imam Bo Hassan, became the new Datuk Banda. He had probably commissioned his son to build a modern home for the family in 1863. Again, we can debate that issue. It could have been a timber, and so forth, but it just seems to match the dates. The events happened in the 1850s, and now we have a house in 1863. It just seems to match the dates. But who knows? Maybe there's no availability of concrete at the time. The Rumah Batu's beginnings, 1863 to 1921. Okay, before that, I'm just going to share a little slideshow. And I have, it's just very short, amateurish sort of slideshow. I don't know whether you can see it. Can you see that? Okay. Let's see. All right, so there's a slideshow. Here we are with Rumah Batu, the front, and some plans here of the downstairs and upstairs. I know my photography is not so good, but there's Banda, Muhammad Kasim, his wife, Dan Sada, with the children and Rani Margaret. See how close they are. And this is Datuk Imam Hassan, the father of Datuk Banda Kasim, and his wife, Datin Asia. Okay, and this is the back of Rumah Batu, as well as Dayan Lehut, who's the daughter of Datuk Banda. Okay, and there is the obituary. It says here, the receipt of the news of the death of Abang Muhammad Kasim Dato' Banda of Sarawak at Mecca on the 18th of July 1921 is recorded with the deepest regret. This is from the Sarawak Gazette. And of course, he's listed here as one of the ministers in the Council Negeri. Okay, let's see if we can make it bigger. No, we can. There it is. This is the Council Negeri. I've got the pictures in another form elsewhere. Let's see. Okay. I could show you in more detail later. And this is, of course, gathering at Darul Kunia, Dato' Banda's second born, Dato' Abdullah. Yeah, he built his house here. And of course, this is my great grandfather, Abang Haji Fadil, and his wife, Dayan Kazima. Then Dayan Rabia is there. And this is the this is at Darul Kunia, right? Yeah, this is the other house. An appointment of Dato' Petinggi. Now, it was reinstated many years later because of Dato' Petinggi, Abang Haji Abdullah's record. That's the reason why the Raja Brook reinstated. We'll talk about that later on. Okay, so that's the end of that share. I'm just going to come back to this in a hurry because I think there's a lot more to look at. Now, Dato' Banda Abang Haji Muhammad Qasim built Rumah Batu as a symbol of wealth. Okay, but wealth in this sense is not wealth of it is, yes, it is monetary. Yes, of course, there's a lot of money being put into it, yes. But more importantly, it's semangat. Okay, it is his semangat. Now, this house, if we take 1863, was built out of concrete, shows a greater semangat than even the Astana that was still a wooden bungalow at the time. Okay, the Astana was made concrete in 1870. Okay, during the reign of Charles Brooke. But this was concrete 7 years before. So the semangat is there. Its concrete pillars and wide facade are a blend of European and Malay architectural styles. It has 3 levels or floors. On the ground floor, its open planned frontal space lies imposingly in front of a cluster of rooms used to house many children and grandchildren of the Dato' Banda. On the first floor or second level, there is a main hall used in the past for many major and important events, mainly those of a ceremonial nature. Behind this hall, there are the living quarters, kitchen, and a communal bathing space on the veranda. There is also an attic space which once hid the women and children of the house from the public, especially when distinct personalities came to visit the house. This was because they would not be seen nor heard in the presence of strangers. Okay, let's take a look. As a wealthy man, the Dato' Banda wanted to share his wealth with his family and children. He thus decreed that the house would be in the charge of the family until such times that they were all with homes of their own. He was concerned about the future of his family. To this day, anyone who is by means descended from the late Dato' Banda Qasim is entitled to stay at Rumah Batu should they be without a home, homeless. Therefore, presently, there are people who still stay in Rumah Batu as a result of this foresighted man. He's very foresightful, you know. He really cared for his descendants, you know, and wanted a home for them. Dato' Banda Abang Haji Muhammad Qasim inherited the title from his father, Dato' Banda Abang Haji Hassan, after the latter passed away in 1907. Now, the dates in which Dato' Banda took office was inferred from a chart that shows the major Kuching Datos and their kinship relations, 1841 to 1964, from Craig Lockhart, from Kampung to City, a social history of Kuching, Malaysia. All right. That's page 123. Thereafter, he was installed as a member of the Raja Supreme Council on July the 16th, 1908. Now, this is from the Sarawak Government Gazette, July 16, 1908, page 17. He held this post until his death on the 18th of July, 1921. And of course, his obituary that I showed earlier on is posted also in the Sarawak Gazette, volume 14, on Monday, the 1st of August, 1921. He was married to Dana Saada. The two had, now, forgive me here, I was not that known, but Abang Iskandar, do you know how many children he had?
No.
No.
Eight survived, but there are more that did not survive him. Yeah.
At the time of writing, I only had information of 10, so I wrote the two had 10 children. So forgive me if I'm mistaken there. We can always update that information. The late Banda was the prominent leader in Sarawak Malay affairs at the beginning of the 20th century. He may not have known much English, yet under the influence of the Raja's wife, Rani Margaret, the Rumah Batu was used as a school for the teaching of English and other important subjects such as mathematics and religious education. All these were prepared by the Datuk Banda himself with the assistance of his children, namely Abang Abdillah and a number of other Malays such as Mr. Shawal and Mr. Ismail. Now, this is taken from Margaret Brooke, the Rani of Sarawak, Good Morning and Good Night, in 1934. The book talks about the Rani's involvement and interest in her husband's reign of Sarawak. Particularly chapter 7 talks about the Rani's relationship with those who lived in Rumah Batu during these early years. Haji Muhammad Hasbi Sulaiman, Perjuangan Anti-Session Sarawak, Peranan Utama Persatuan Kebangsaan Melayu Sarawak, Kuching, PKMS, 1989, page 28, describes the people who helped the Datuk Banda run the primary school he established in Rumah Batu. So 2 sources here. Okay, it was quite nice to read in a university in Perth, in Western Australia, all this stuff about my own family. So it was quite interesting research. Okay, so carrying on. During the early years, Rumah Batu was also used as a balai datu or datu's court. It was here that the many hearings and judgments were passed in accordance to Islamic and Malay traditional law. The house's main hall on the first floor was used as the court's main hall. There, many decisions as to the ways the Malays were governed during the Brooke era took place. Thus, the Rumah Batu served as a native court for the Malays of Sarawak during this era. It stood as a sign for native autonomy during the period of the White Rajas. Besides having a notable house, the Batu also owned a range of ponies, which were used for the races. He also sponsored many of his boats for the Sarawak Regatta, which was held once a year. Both the races and the regatta were hallmarks within the Brooke calendar of social events. The Dato owned the largest house in Sarawak, second only to the Astana after it was built, the palace of the Brooke Raja. He owned as many as 10 carriages in the early 1900s. So that's like owning 10 cars, okay? These were all symbols of his status as the second most powerful man in the state. He must have had stables somewhere. Not so sure where it was, but, you know, keep the horses and all that. Imagine those old, yeah, this is from Bob Rees, page 24. So yeah, all these old movies where they have all these horses and carriages, they had 10 of those. Thus, the man was noted for his interest in leisure as well as political involvement throughout his career as Datuk Banda from 1908 to 1921. Now, we'll carry on with the life of Datuk Petinggi Abang Haji Abdillah, Abang Antik, 1862 to 1946. The Datuk Banda's second son, Abang Abdillah, was another notable figure who lived most of his life in Rumah Batu. He was born in 1862. He helped with the administration of his father's primary school, which was located in the house. He was also known as the first Malay to ever learn English and graduated from a British school, St. Thomas's School in Kuching. It was an Anglican mission school. It still is. All right, and this is from Salam bin Ahmad, Datuk Petinggi Abang Haji Abdillah Antik, Ketua dan Pemimpin Masyarakat Sarawak Pramadeka dengan catatan kenangan tentang Abang Haji Muhammad Kasim. So page 8. Being the first Sarawakian native to be educated in English showed the importance of those who lived in this house. Abang Abdillah became the most prominent Malay leader to rule Sarawak. In 1937, the title of most prominent Malay chief, or Patinggi, was revived after 85 years. This title became taboo due to its previous use with Patinggi Abdul Ghaffar in the early 1850s. The third Brooke Raja, Sir Charles Viner Brooke, reinstated the use of this title on April 29, 1937, awarding it to Abang Haji Abdillah for his outstanding achievement as the paramount chief of the Sarawak Malays. All right. Okay, that's from the Sarawak Gazette, May 1st, 1937, page 102. This made him the most prestigious Malay chief in Sarawak's history. It was necessary for he was involved in 3 critical periods in the nation's past as a center of Malay power and prowess. His reign saw the Japanese occupation and the return of the Brooks thereafter. He was also a leader during the anti-cession movement, which resisted British colonialism in Sarawak. And finally, he reigned during the first year of Sarawak as a crown colony in 1946. His death on the 17th of November 1946 was mourned by many. It also heralded a new age in Sarawakian politics. The reason why I bring him up is because he has actually stayed in Rumah Batu for a very long time before building Darul Kunia in his later years. So he's a main resident of this house, as much as we associate him with Darul Kunia. Now, conclusion, the early years, 1863 to 1841 of Rumah Batu were important for making Brooks Sarawak synonymous with Parabangan supremacy in local politics. For these were the two pillars that stabilized Sarawak's sovereignty. At a time when half the world was either colonized or colonizing, Sarawak was protected. The Datus and Brooks were in a symbiotic relationship, bagai awar dengan tebing, okay, that ensured this stability. In as much as the Brooks were the sovereigns of Sarawak, their legitimacy and expansionism depended on the Datu's ability to administer the natives in traditional ways. Just as native stability was assured through the Parabangan Datus, likewise, the Brooks kept the outside world at rest and on a peaceful footing. This mutual dependence ensured Sarawak's independence via British protectionism, which came in 1884. Hence, this partnership, the very one that had created Rumah Batu, also enabled a state of peaceful relations that lasted nearly a century. And that is the end of chapter 1. And I don't know when we can do chapter 2, but we can discuss about it later. Thank you very much.